At 62, I had learned not to expect much from my son anymore. But this time was different. For the first time in years, my son, Daniel, had invited me on a family cruise. Not a phone call, not a rushed Sunday dinner, a real invitation. He had told me, "Mom, you deserve a break. Come with us. It'll be good for all of us." I had replayed those words in my head for weeks. So that morning, I stood in my bedroom with my suitcase open on the bed, carefully folding my clothes. I had even bought a new blue dress, nothing expensive. I just wanted to look nice. I wanted my son to see that his mother was happy to be there. On the dresser sat a photograph of Daniel when he was 7 years old, his missing front tooth, his crooked smile, his little arms wrapped around my neck. I smiled at the picture. "Maybe things are finally getting better," I whispered. Then my phone buzzed. I expected a message from Daniel saying they were leaving soon. Instead, I saw 7 words that made my hands go cold. "Mom, you're not coming on the cruise." I stared at the screen. I read it again. Then again. I thought maybe there was a mistake. Before I could respond, another message appeared. "My wife wants just family." I stopped breathing for a moment. Just family? I was his mother. I had raised him. I had worked 2 jobs after his father left. I had stayed awake beside him through fevers, school problems, broken hearts, and every difficult year of his childhood. And now, apparently, I wasn't family. My fingers trembled as I typed, "Daniel, what are you talking about?" The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared, appeared again. Finally, his reply came. "Please don't make this difficult, Mom." That sentence hurt more than the first one. I slowly sat on the edge of the bed. My suitcase was still open. My blue dress was still lying on top. But suddenly, I couldn't even look at it. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. Then my phone buzzed one more time. It wasn't Daniel. It was an email from the cruise company. I opened it without thinking. And that's when I noticed something strange. The reservation wasn't made that week. It had been paid for months ago, and according to the booking record, I had never been added as a last-minute guest. My name had been on the original reservation from the very beginning. So why had my son suddenly told me not to come? I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Then I noticed one more detail, a note attached to the reservation, a note I had never seen before. It said, "Passenger must not be informed until departure arrangements are finalized." I whispered, "Who wrote that?" And for the first time, I realized something terrifying. Maybe being kicked off the cruise was never the real story. Maybe someone had been planning something long before I received that text. I barely slept that night. The sentence from the cruise reservation kept circling through my mind. Passenger must not be informed until departure arrangements are finalized. Who had written it, and why had it been attached to my name? By 7 the next morning, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to beg my son to let me on a cruise. I was going to find out why he had suddenly decided I wasn't family. I called Daniel again. This time, he answered. "Mom?" His voice sounded tired. "Daniel, I need you to explain something." A long silence followed. "There's nothing to explain." "Yes, there is." I took a breath. "Your message said your wife wants just family." He sighed. "Mom, please, it's not personal." I almost laughed. Not personal? Being told by my own son that I wasn't welcome on a family vacation wasn't personal? "Then let me speak to your wife." Another silence. "She doesn't want to talk right now." "Why?" "Because she knows you'll turn this into an argument." I felt something inside me go completely still. "Daniel," I said quietly, "I haven't argued with you. I'm asking a simple question. Why was I removed from the trip?" He didn't answer. Then I heard a woman's voice in the background. His wife, Rebecca. I couldn't make out everything she said, but I heard enough. Don't tell her anything. My stomach tightened. Daniel? He immediately lowered his voice. Mom, I have to go. Wait. What did Rebecca just say? Nothing. Then he hung up. I sat there staring at my phone. For nearly a minute, I didn't move. Then I opened the family group chat. Usually, everyone used it to share photos, restaurant plans, or birthday messages. But that morning, something strange happened. A message appeared, then disappeared. I had only seen it for a second, but I'd read the first line. Rebecca. She cannot be on this cruise. I froze. I refreshed the chat. The message was gone. Someone had deleted it. I immediately called Daniel again. No answer. I called Rebecca. She declined the call. Then, 5 minutes later, I received a message from her. Please respect our decision. I typed back, I am your husband's mother. I'd like to understand what I've done wrong. She replied almost immediately. You haven't done anything wrong. I stared at those words. Then another message appeared. This is just about family. There it was again. That word. Family. I put my phone down. Something wasn't right. If I hadn't done anything wrong, why were they so desperate to keep me away? I went back to the group chat and looked carefully at the conversation. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A message from Rebecca had been deleted, but the notification preview was still visible on my old tablet. I opened it. My heart began pounding. The message had been sent to Daniel the previous night. It read, If she comes, everything will be ruined. I read it 3 times. Everything? What exactly was going to be ruined? The cruise, their marriage, their finances, or something else entirely? Before I could think of an answer, my phone rang. It was Daniel's daughter, Emily, my granddaughter. She sounded frightened. Grandma? Emily? What's wrong? Are you coming to the house? No, sweetheart, why? She hesitated, then whispered, Because Mom told Dad that you can't know. Know what? Silence. Emily? Her voice became even quieter. Grandma, I think Dad doesn't know what Mom is planning. The call suddenly ended. I stared at the phone, and for the first time, I wasn't thinking about the cruise anymore. I was thinking about my son, and wondering whether the person I trusted most was the one person who had no idea what was really happening. By 9 that morning, I was standing outside Daniel's house. I hadn't planned to go there. But after Emily's phone call, staying home and pretending everything was normal was no longer an option. I needed answers. Daniel's SUV was parked in the driveway, so they were still there. I knocked. A few seconds later, the door opened. Rebecca stood in front of me. She was dressed in a white sweater, expensive sunglasses resting on top of her head, and she looked completely calm. Too calm. Her eyes moved from my face to the small overnight bag in my hand, then back to my face. You came. I need to talk to Daniel. He's getting ready. Then I'll wait. Rebecca stepped outside and quietly closed the door behind her. She didn't invite me in. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Look, she said, folding her arms. I don't want this to become dramatic. I don't either. Then please just accept that you're not coming. I looked at her. Why? She sighed as though I were making her explain something obvious. This is a family trip. I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought I was family. You know what I mean. No, Rebecca, I don't. She looked away. Then she said something I'll never forget. You've had Daniel his whole life. I stared at her. She continued. Now it's time for us to have him. My heart sank. For a moment, I couldn't find the words. I looked past her toward the front door. Can I at least say goodbye to my son? Rebecca hesitated. Then Daniel appeared behind the glass. He saw me. His expression changed immediately. He opened the door. Mom? I looked at him. Why didn't you tell me this yourself? He lowered his eyes. I was going to. When? He didn't answer. Rebecca stepped closer to him. We're already running late. Daniel nodded. That was when I realized something painful. He wasn't fighting for me. He wasn't even asking his wife to reconsider. He was simply letting it happen. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Fine, I said. I won't come. Daniel finally looked at me. Mom. I raised my hand. No. Don't. I turned around. But before I reached the driveway, I heard a small voice behind me. Grandma! I stopped. Emily came running out of the house. She threw her arms around me. I hugged her tightly. I'm going to miss you, sweetheart. She pulled back and looked around to make sure her parents weren't watching. Then she slipped something into my palm, a folded piece of paper. Don't open it here, she whispered. I nodded. What is it? It's important. What did you write? Emily shook her head. I didn't write it. My stomach tightened. Then who did? She looked toward the house. Mom. I felt the blood drain from my face. Rebecca had written it. Emily squeezed my hand. Please don't let Mom know I gave it to you. Then she ran back inside. I got into my car. I didn't start the engine. I simply sat there with the folded paper in my hand. For several minutes, I stared at it. Finally, I opened it. There were only 2 sentences. The first one made my heart race. Grandma, Dad doesn't know what Mom is planning. I read it again. Then I unfolded the paper completely. There was one more line beneath it, and that line changed everything. Look at the passenger list before the ship leaves. I stopped breathing. Why would Emily tell me to look at the passenger list? What was I supposed to find? I grabbed my phone and opened the cruise reservation again. I had already seen Daniel's name, Rebecca's, Emily's. But this time, I slowed down. I scrolled through every passenger listed under their reservation. Then I saw a name I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Then I saw the date of birth. My hands began to shake because I knew that name. I hadn't heard it in more than 20 years. And according to every person I knew, that man was dead. I stared at the passenger list until the letters began to blur. Michael Carter. There was no mistaking the name. I hadn't seen it written anywhere in more than 20 years, and I certainly hadn't expected to see it on a cruise reservation with my son's family. Michael Carter was my husband's younger brother, Daniel's uncle, the man who had supposedly died 22 years ago. I remembered the night we received the phone call. Michael had been working overseas. There had been an accident, a fire, a body that could not be identified. My husband had spent months trying to find answers. Then, eventually, there was a death certificate, a funeral, a grave, and a family that was forced to accept the impossible. Michael was gone. At least, that's what we'd been told. My hands trembled as I zoomed in on the passenger information. The name was there. So was the date of birth. It matched. I whispered, "No." I checked the reservation again. Maybe it was an error. Maybe someone had used the same name. Then I noticed the passport information, the nationality, the age. Everything matched the man I remembered. I immediately called Daniel. He answered on the 4th ring. "Mom, I'm busy." "Daniel, I need to ask you something." "Mom, is Uncle Michael alive?" Silence. Not the normal kind. The kind that tells you the person on the other end is trying to decide what lie to tell. "Where did you hear that name?" My heart dropped. "You know who I'm talking about." "Mom, I have to go." "Daniel." He hung up. I called again. He didn't answer. I sat back in my chair. So he knew. My son knew. But why hadn't he told me? And more importantly, why was Michael traveling with my family? I opened the reservation again. This time, I noticed something I had missed. Michael wasn't listed as a regular passenger. His cabin was in a different section of the ship, a private suite, paid in full, under a different credit card. I looked at the payment information. The card belonged to Rebecca, my daughter-in-law. My stomach tightened. Rebecca had personally paid for Michael's suite. Why? I immediately called the cruise company. The representative confirmed the reservation. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Carter is listed as a passenger. Was he added recently? There was a pause. No. When was his booking made? The representative checked the system. Approximately 4 months ago. 4 months. I closed my eyes. That was almost exactly when Daniel had first told me about the cruise, which meant this wasn't some last-minute arrangement. Rebecca had planned this months ago. I asked one more question. Has Mr. Carter checked in yet? No, ma'am. His reservation is still active. Can you tell me where he boarded? I'm sorry, that's private information. I understood. I thanked her and ended the call. Then I noticed another email. It had arrived while I was on the phone. The subject line read, Updated Family Cruise Itinerary. I opened it. There was a revised list of passengers. My name was missing, but Michael's was still there. And underneath his name was a small note. Private meeting, day 2. I stared at those words. A private meeting. With whom? I opened my old family files. I still had documents from the years after my husband's death, bank statements, property records, insurance papers, letters, everything I'd kept in case Daniel ever needed them. I started searching for Michael's name. For almost an hour, I found nothing unusual. Then I discovered an old letter. It was dated 3 months before Michael's supposed death. I had never paid much attention to it. But now I opened it. The letter was addressed to my husband, the handwriting was Michael's, and one sentence made my blood run cold. If anything happens to me, don't let them get the property. I read the sentence again. Then I looked at the cruise itinerary, the private suite, Rebecca's payment, the secret passenger, the hidden meeting. Suddenly, the pieces started connecting. This wasn't about excluding me from a vacation. It wasn't even about Rebecca wanting just family. The cruise had been planned around something much bigger, something involving my husband's old property, and possibly the man we had buried 22 years ago. I reached for my phone and called Daniel one more time. This time, he answered. I didn't give him time to speak. Daniel, your Uncle Michael is alive. Silence. Then I heard him whisper, Mom. His voice cracked. Please don't go looking for him. I froze. Why? Another silence. Then he said something that made my entire body go cold. Because, Mom, if Michael is on that ship, then Rebecca already knows the truth about Dad's death. The call went dead. I stared at the phone. My husband's death had always been ruled an accident. But suddenly, I wasn't sure it had been an accident at all. For 22 years, I had believed my husband died in an accident, a heart attack, a sudden fall, a tragic end to a difficult period in our lives. But after Daniel's last words, that certainty was gone. If Michael is on that ship, then Rebecca already knows the truth about Dad's death. I sat alone in my living room, staring at the photograph of my husband. He was smiling in the picture, one hand resting on Daniel's shoulder. Daniel was only 12 years old. I remembered that day perfectly. My husband had promised our son they would go fishing the following weekend. They never got the chance. I had spent 22 years believing that was simply how life worked. You lost someone. You grieved. You moved on. But now one question wouldn't leave my mind. What had Michael been hiding? I pulled out the old box of documents I'd kept in the attic. Inside were insurance papers, property records, bank statements, letters, and the original report from the night my husband died. I had never read the report carefully. I was too devastated at the time. Now I forced myself to. The first few pages contained nothing unusual. Then I noticed something. The official report said my husband had been driving home from a meeting with a property developer. I frowned. I had always been told he was coming home from work. Why hadn't anyone told me about the meeting? I turned the page. There was a handwritten note attached to the report. Meeting concerned transfer of ownership. Transfer of ownership? I searched through the old documents. After several minutes, I found a property deed. My husband's name was on it, but beneath his name was another name, Michael Carter. I stared at the document. The property wasn't just a house. It was a piece of land worth millions today. And according to the deed, my husband had been trying to transfer part of it to Michael shortly before his death. Why? I kept searching. Then I found something even stranger. A second document. This one was dated 2 days before my husband died. It was a letter addressed to a lawyer. My husband had written, "I have discovered that someone has been moving money without my knowledge. I believe Michael may know who is responsible." My hands began to shake. Someone had been stealing from the family, and my husband believed Michael knew about it. I kept reading. The final paragraph said, "If I cannot resolve this before Friday, I want my wife to receive everything. Do not allow anyone to pressure her into signing anything." I stopped. Friday, the day my husband died. I looked at the date, then at the cruise itinerary, then at Michael's name. Suddenly, I understood why Rebecca wanted me away from the ship. She wasn't simply excluding me. She was trying to keep me from learning something. I grabbed my phone and called Emily. She answered in a whisper. "Grandma?" "Emily, I need you to tell me the truth." "About what?" "Your mother. What is she planning?" There was silence. Then Emily said, "Mom found Dad's old files." "Which files?" "I don't know, but she was looking for something." "What?" Emily hesitated. "A property document." My heart stopped. "Did she find it?" "I think so." "Where is it?" "I don't know." Then I heard a door close in the background. Emily's voice suddenly became frightened. "Grandma, I have to go." "Emily." She whispered one last thing. "Mom thinks you don't know about the trust." Then the call ended. The trust. I had completely forgotten about it. Years ago, my husband had created a family trust. He told me it was only a precaution. I had never touched it, never needed it. But if the property was connected to that trust, then whoever controlled the trust could potentially control millions of dollars. I opened my laptop and searched through my old legal records. There it was, the trust agreement, and my name was listed as the primary beneficiary. But there was another clause, a clause I had never noticed. If I died, the trust would transfer to Daniel, and if Daniel was unable to inherit, the property would go to his children. I leaned back. Rebecca couldn't simply take the property, but there was one way she could gain control. If Daniel signed a certain document. I suddenly remembered the strange message from the cruise reservation. Passenger must not be informed until departure arrangements are finalized. The cruise wasn't just a vacation. They were planning to have Daniel sign something while he was away from home, away from lawyers, away from me. I immediately called my attorney. He answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Carter? I need you to check something for me." "What is it?" "My family trust." There was a pause. Then his voice changed. Why are you asking about it now? Because I think someone is trying to change it. He went silent. Then he said, Mrs. Carter, there was an attempted amendment filed 3 weeks ago. My heart slammed against my chest. Who filed it? Another pause. Your son. I closed my eyes. Daniel. My own son. Had he really tried to change the trust, or had someone convinced him to do it? Before I could ask another question, my attorney said, But there's something else. What? The amendment was rejected. Why? Because your signature was required. I looked at the photograph of my husband. Then I understood. They couldn't take the property from me legally. So they had found another way. Get me off the ship. Get Daniel to sign new documents, and make sure I never knew what was happening until it was too late. I stood up. My hands were no longer shaking. I'd spent 22 years believing I had lost my husband to an accident. Now, I had a reason to believe his death might have been connected to the very property my daughter-in-law was trying to control. And somewhere on that cruise ship was a man the world believed had been dead for 22 years. I looked at the clock. The ship was scheduled to depart in less than 6 hours. I picked up my coat. I wasn't going on that cruise as a passenger. I was going there to stop my son from making the biggest mistake of his life, and to finally ask Michael Carter one question. What really happened to my husband? I drove toward the port with one thought repeating in my mind. Get there before the ship leaves. For 22 years, I had accepted my husband's death. Now I had proof that something had been hidden from me. The trust, the property, Michael's name, and Daniel's attempted amendment. But there was one thing I still couldn't understand. Why would my son try to change a trust that was supposed to protect his own future? I called him again. This time, he answered. Mom, where are you? His voice sounded nervous. On my way to the port. A long silence. You can't come. I know what you and Rebecca are planning. What are you talking about? The trust. His breathing changed. Mom, did you sign something? He didn't answer. That was enough. Daniel, did you? Finally, he whispered, Yes. My heart sank. What did you sign? I thought it was something else. Something else? Rebecca said it was just paperwork for the property. I gripped the steering wheel. Which property? The Carter land. My husband's land, the property he had spent years protecting. Why would you sign anything without showing it to a lawyer? I trusted her. His voice cracked. She told me you wanted me to have control. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I never told her that. I know that now. I slowed the car. Daniel, listen carefully. Whatever you signed, do not sign anything else. Mom, I already made a mistake. What mistake? He didn't answer immediately. Then he said, There's a meeting on the ship. With who? Michael. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. Did you know he was alive? No. Then how did he end up on your cruise? I don't know. Daniel, who arranged the meeting? He hesitated. Rebecca. I closed my eyes. Of course. Then Daniel said something that made everything even worse. She told me Uncle Michael had proof that Dad wanted the property transferred to him. What? She said Dad had secretly changed the ownership before he died. That isn't true. I didn't know that. You should have asked me. I was trying to protect the family. I felt tears gathering in my eyes. You were trying to protect the family by removing your mother from it? He went silent. Then he whispered, I'm sorry. I wanted to be angry, but beneath the anger was something much worse. Fear. Because my son wasn't the mastermind. He was being used. I arrived at the port 40 minutes later. The cruise terminal was crowded. Families were laughing. Children were running around with small suitcases. People were taking photographs. Everyone looked happy. No one knew that my entire family was about to fall apart. I walked inside. At the security desk, I showed my identification and explained that I needed to speak to a passenger. The employee checked the system. Which passenger? Daniel Carter. She looked at the screen. He's already boarded. And Michael Carter? She paused, then looked at me. Michael Carter's also checked in. My stomach tightened. Can you tell me where they are? I'm sorry, ma'am. I turned away. Then I noticed a woman standing near the boarding entrance, Rebecca. She was holding a folder, and beside her stood Daniel. He looked pale. I walked toward them. Rebecca saw me first. Her expression changed instantly. Why are you here? I looked at Daniel. Because you lied to him. Rebecca stepped between us. You have no right to interfere. I have every right. She lowered her voice. You don't understand what you're doing. Oh, I understand perfectly. I pointed toward the folder in her hand. Is that the paperwork? Her face went still. Daniel looked at the folder. Rebecca? She said nothing. I looked at my son. Ask her what you're about to sign. Rebecca's eyes filled with anger. Your mother is trying to destroy this family. I shook my head. No. I looked directly at Daniel. I'm trying to stop you from giving away something that isn't yours to give. Daniel took the folder from Rebecca. He opened it. His eyes moved across the first page, then the second. His face slowly changed. What is this? Rebecca reached for the papers. Give me that. Daniel stepped back. No. He turned another page. Then he looked at me. Mom. What? His voice was barely audible. This says I'm transferring ownership. I nodded. Exactly. To Rebecca? No. Daniel looked at the final page. His face went white. To a company. I stepped closer. Whose company? He looked at Rebecca. She didn't answer. Rebecca? Still nothing. Then Daniel saw the company name. Carter Holdings International. He looked confused. What's this? I recognized the name immediately. It was the company my husband's brother had used 22 years ago. Michael's company, the same company that had supposedly disappeared after his death. Daniel looked at me. Mom, why does Uncle Michael's company own the new trust? I couldn't answer, because at that exact moment, someone behind us spoke. A man's voice, calm, cold, familiar. Because it was never really my company that disappeared. I turned around, and there he was, Michael Carter, alive, standing only a few feet away, the man we had buried 22 years ago. He looked at me and said, Your husband never died the way they told you. The terminal seemed to disappear around me. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. Then Michael looked at Rebecca, and his expression hardened. And she knows exactly what happened. For several seconds, nobody moved. I stared at Michael. The face was older. His hair was almost completely gray. There were deep lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 22 years ago. But it was him. The same eyes. The same voice. The same small scar above his left eyebrow. My knees nearly gave out. Michael. He nodded. I know. I looked at Daniel. He was staring at his uncle as if the dead had just walked out of a grave. You're alive. Michael's eyes lowered. I've been alive all this time. Daniel turned toward Rebecca. You knew? Rebecca didn't answer. Rebecca, did you know he was alive? She finally whispered. Yes. Daniel looked devastated. How long? 3 years. He stepped backward. 3 years? She tried to explain. It wasn't what you think. Then what was it? Rebecca looked at Michael. Michael answered for her. She found me. Daniel's face tightened. Why? Michael took a slow breath. Because she was looking for the same thing your father was looking for before he died. I felt a chill run through me. The money? Michael shook his head. No. The property? No. He looked directly at me. The truth. I couldn't speak. Michael continued. Your husband discovered that someone inside the family had been moving money through shell companies. He confronted the person responsible. Who? Michael looked at Rebecca. She started crying. I didn't do it. Michael's voice remained calm. You didn't start it. Rebecca looked up. But you continued it. Daniel turned to his wife. What is he talking about? She shook her head. I was trying to fix everything. By lying to me? I was protecting you. From what? She looked at me. From your mother. Daniel stared at her. What? Rebecca pointed toward me. She knew about the property. She knew about the trust. She knew your father had hidden documents. I stepped forward. I knew nothing. You were supposed to. Rebecca's voice broke. Your husband left everything to you. I shook my head. And you wanted it. No. She wiped her tears. I wanted to protect Daniel. Michael interrupted. That's not true. Rebecca looked at him. You don't know what I wanted. I know exactly what you wanted. He pulled a small envelope from inside his jacket, then handed it to Daniel. Open it. Daniel hesitated. I watched my son open the envelope. Inside were photocopies of bank transfers, dozens of them. Daniel looked at the first page, then the second. His face slowly drained of color. Rebecca. She said nothing. These are your accounts. She looked away. I can explain. Daniel turned another page. These payments started 3 years ago. Michael nodded. That was when she found me. Daniel looked confused. Why would she send money to you? Michael answered. She didn't. He pointed to the documents. She sent money to the same company that had been connected to your father's disappearance. Daniel's mouth fell open. What? I felt my heart stop. Disappearance? Michael looked at me. I never said your husband died. I stared at him. But there was a death certificate. Fake. A funeral. An empty coffin. I covered my mouth. For 22 years, I had mourned beside a coffin that may never have contained my husband's body. Michael continued. Your husband discovered the financial fraud. He knew he was in danger. The night he disappeared, he asked me to protect the documents. Why didn't you come back? Michael's eyes filled with regret. Because the people responsible threatened Daniel. My son froze. Me? Michael nodded. They told me that if I came forward, you would be next. I looked at Daniel. All those years, all those unanswered questions, all those nights wondering why my husband had left without saying goodbye. It had never been an accident. It had been a disappearance, and my son had been the reason Michael stayed hidden. Daniel turned toward Rebecca. Then why did you bring Michael on this cruise? She didn't answer. Michael did. Because she believed I had the final document. Daniel looked at the folder. The document transferring the property? Yes. But why? Michael looked at me. Because your mother is the only person who can legally stop the transfer. Everything suddenly made sense. They didn't want me on the cruise because they needed me away from the paperwork. They wanted Daniel to sign first. Then, they intended to pressure me later. But they hadn't expected Michael to reveal himself. Rebecca stepped toward Daniel. Please. He backed away. You lied to me for years. I was scared. You used me. I love you. Daniel shook his head. You didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. Then he looked at me. His eyes filled with tears. Mom. I knew what he was going to say, and somehow, hearing it hurt more than everything else. I chose her over you. I didn't answer. He stepped closer. I thought you were the problem. I looked at my son for a long moment. You didn't choose her, Daniel. He looked confused. You chose the story she told you. He began to cry. I was wrong. Yes. I didn't soften the word. You were. The cruise announcement suddenly echoed through the terminal. Final boarding. All passengers must proceed immediately. Everyone around us began moving, but none of us did. The ship was waiting. The papers were still unsigned. The property was still protected. And the truth my family had buried for 22 years was finally standing in front of us. Then Michael looked at me. There's one thing you still don't know. I frowned. What? He reached into his coat and pulled out an old photograph. He handed it to me. I looked down. It was a photograph of my husband, but he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was a man I had never seen before. On the back of the photograph was a date, 3 days after my husband's supposed death. My hands began to shake. I looked at Michael. Where was this taken? He answered quietly. At a hotel 300 miles from the crash site. I stared at the photograph. Then I noticed something even more terrifying. My husband was holding a newspaper. The date on it was clearly visible, and it was 3 days after the world believed he had died. I looked up. Michael. He nodded. Your husband was alive after the funeral. My heart stopped. Then where is he now? Michael's expression changed, and for the first time since he appeared, he looked afraid. I could barely breathe. Where's my husband now? Michael didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the cruise ship, then toward Daniel. Finally, he looked back at me. He's dead. My heart sank. But you just said... He was alive after the funeral, Michael said quietly. But he didn't stay alive for long. I felt the strength leave my body. Then what happened? Michael lowered his voice. Your husband discovered who was stealing from the family. He tried to expose them. The night he disappeared, he gave me the documents and told me to protect you and Daniel. And you ran? I had no choice. He pulled another envelope from his coat. This is what he left behind. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. My husband's handwriting. The first words made my eyes fill with tears. My dear Margaret, if you're reading this, I failed to come home. I pressed the letter against my chest. For 22 years, I had wondered whether my husband had thought about me during his final days. Now, I had my answer. I kept reading. He explained everything. He had discovered that money was being stolen from the family business and that someone was trying to gain control of the property. He had created the trust specifically to protect me and Daniel. But he knew that if the wrong person gained control of Daniel, they could eventually control everything. Then I reached the final paragraph. Protect our son, even from the person he loves most. One day, someone may convince him that you are his enemy. If that happens, don't fight him. Let the truth find him. I stopped reading. Tears rolled down my face. Daniel was standing beside me. He had heard enough. Dad knew, he whispered. I nodded. He knew someone might turn us against each other. Daniel looked at Rebecca. She was crying now, but there was no anger in her face anymore, only fear. Daniel walked toward her. Is all of this true? Rebecca couldn't look at him. Yes. He closed his eyes. Why? She finally spoke. Because I was drowning. She explained that years earlier, her family had accumulated enormous debts. Michael's old company had been connected to those debts. When Rebecca discovered Michael was still alive, she believed he possessed the documents that could save her. She had convinced herself that taking control of the property was the only way to protect herself and Daniel. But somewhere along the way, she stopped protecting her marriage and started protecting herself. Daniel listened silently. Then he said something I will never forget. "You could have asked us for help," Rebecca cried. "I was ashamed." Daniel shook his head. "You were afraid to lose everything." He looked at me. "And because of that, you almost made me lose my mother." Rebecca had no answer. A security officer approached us. "Sir, the ship is preparing to depart." Daniel looked at the cruise ship, then at me. "I don't want to go." I gave him a tired smile. "Neither do I." For the first time in years, we walked away from something together, not toward it, away from it. The cruise left without us, and strangely enough, I didn't feel like I had lost anything. I had spent my whole life believing that family meant never giving up on the people you loved. But that day, I learned something different. Family isn't about who sits beside you at a dinner table. It isn't about who gets invited on a cruise. And it certainly isn't about sharing a last name. Family is the person who tells you the truth when lying would be easier. The person who protects you when you aren't there to defend yourself. The person who refuses to abandon you when everyone else has decided you're no longer useful. 3 months later, the legal investigation was complete. The trust remained in my name. The property was protected. The financial fraud was exposed. Rebecca faced the consequences of what she had done, and Michael finally gave authorities every document he had kept hidden for 22 years. But there was one thing I chose not to do. I didn't disown my son. Daniel came to my house every Sunday after that. At first, we barely spoke. Then slowly, we began rebuilding what had been broken. One afternoon, he brought me a small box. "What's this?" I asked. He smiled sadly. "Your birthday present." Inside was a photograph. It was the same photograph from the cruise reservation. The 3 of us, Daniel, his daughter Emily, and me. On the back he had written, "Mom, you were never the person who wasn't family. You were the family I was too blind to appreciate." I cried. He hugged me. And for the first time in a very long time, I let myself believe that maybe our family could heal. The cruise had left without me, but perhaps that was the greatest blessing of all. Because if I had boarded that ship, I might never have discovered the truth. I might have signed nothing. I might have lost everything. Instead, I lost a vacation and found my son again. Years later, people would sometimes ask me why I never took another cruise. I always smiled. Then I'd tell them, because the last time my son told me I wasn't family, I discovered just how much my family was worth. And I learned one final lesson. Never confuse being excluded from someone's plans with being excluded from their heart. Sometimes rejection is not the end of your story. Sometimes it's the moment that finally reveals the truth.